In a world where Twitter leads the headlines and the 24-hour news cycle forces people to choose sides, we're here to help you cut through the noise and discover that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Hosted by entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and regular media contributor Seth Denson. Subscribe, share, rank, and review. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle on the Real News Communication Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Somewhere in the Middle, I am Seth Denson, your host. Joined, as always, by the talented Andrew Clark.
Hello, hello.
Hey, buddy.
How you doing?
Is this a new look for you, or is this just laziness on a Monday?
No, I gave it a little bit of a little trial. We'll see.
Yeah?
Yeah.
This isn't, you're not...
Little copy.
Little copy.
There's that No Shave November coming up, little No Shember.
You're just trying to get a jump ahead of it, right?
I could try to be a little more macho, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good look. I'm glad you did it. Zach, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Clean shave in here. You know, that's not for everybody, but I understand. I'd do it if I could. I think I might be into the whole beard thing, but the steps to get there,
sure,
that's the problem. Yeah, and Andrew clearly is not afraid of that. You're looking sharp, Andrew.
Thank you.
Yeah, looks good.
You know, for me, I would gladly trade places with anyone who says that they can't grow a beard and give them mine. So I actually shaved this morning. No, I'm kidding. I didn't. But if I had, it wouldn't look a whole lot different than this.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, beards and male grooming is not what we're going to be talking about today. I know for some of you listeners, you might think that this is taking a different turn for the show today, but that's not where we're going. Instead, we're going to catch up on some things. So last week we talked a lot about what was going to happen in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and what might happen as a result of Dr. Ford's testimony. We will get into that, and man, could we make that its own show. But I got to tell you, I am so over that. Just and not from Dr. Ford's perspective or Judge Kavanaugh's perspective, but the U.S. Senate as a whole has found a new low in my world, and I am going to, if you want to hear where I land on our friends in the U.S. Senate, stick around to the end of the episode. You just might hear my opinions on this, and obviously if you've been in my wake since last Friday, you've already heard some of my opinions on this.
Hot sports opinions.
I will be an equal opportunity offender.
Ooh.
By the end of today's show.
Ooh,
that's for
sure,
because I was frustrated with that, but we'll get to that. But in the meantime, there was other news going on in the world, and some big news, some news stories that would absolutely have been atop of the headlines, if not for what was going on in Supreme Court. And so we'll talk about some of those. I wanted to invite you, though, if you are listening live to our show tends to go live about 1:30 p.m. every Monday. That's when we try to go live, and we did have one of our listeners trying to chat with us during the show last week. Unfortunately, we weren't paying attention to the live feeds, and that happens from time to time. So I always invite you, if you're listening in to the live episode, so you didn't download it through one of the podcasts, feel free to chime in and be part of the conversation. You're always welcome. Who knows? Maybe you'll get invited in studio.
Oh, gosh.
Love to have you. So let's start with some other news that went on over the last couple of weeks. I'd love to get y'all's take on this, guys. Rob Rosenstein. Potato.
Yeah.
I don't know. So who has been I think if you're on the right, you've not been a fan of Mr. Rosenstein's. For those of you that aren't caught up on what that he is, he's the assistant AG, Attorney General. I'm in football mode right now, by the way. Athletic director, He's the assistant Attorney General, and who was the one responsible for hiring Bob Mueller. So last week, or a little over a week ago, I believe it was the New York Times or the Washington Post, but I believe it was the New York Times, came out and said that did a story about the fact that he was quoted by one of his subordinates as offering to wear a wire and perhaps get President Trump recorded saying something that he shouldn't have said so that he could invoke the 25th Amendment.
Allegedly, yeah, that happened. Yeah.
Right. I think that they're trying to figure out who was all in this meeting, Andrew McCabe and some of these others that may not be with the Justice Department anymore. Is this much to do about nothing, guys, or where's your take on this?
one of the other things coming is Republicans in general have been looking for a way, President Trump in particular has been looking for a way to remove Rosenstein from his position ever since Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation.
Because he's the point man now.
He is the point man. And he hasn't budged. He hasn't been intimidated by Trump so far. And Trump has he's told Sessions on Twitter a number of times, wouldn't have hired you if I'd known. You should have stopped this investigation. So is this just a tactic to get rid of him? I don't know. Again, we don't have all the facts yet. But my conspiracy theory hat went on right there. And it just seems like coincidental timing, We're coming up to the midterms, and you want to get rid of this guy. And now suddenly there's, again, another...
That's an interesting angle. I haven't thought about that. So you're saying perhaps this was the Republicans leaking this one?
Could be. The hashtag resistance letter.
Well, and so that's where I was going to go with this, right? So a couple of weeks ago, we had this letter that was also subsequently in the New York Times, right? Mm-hmm. Where somebody, senior official, we talked about it a few weeks ago, in the White House was the resistance, right? Which is a word that most conservatives use all the time. So that's, screaming conservatism when you hear the word resistance. I thought to myself when all this came out, was Rosenstein the resistance? Was he the author of said letter? I don't know. Zach?
The danger of a letter like that, because we talked about it. We talked about whether or not it was a good thing or a bad thing and what that can do on both sides of the aisle. The danger of a letter like this, to me, is that we'll never know, right? It's like the Zodiac Killer. Like somebody could come out for the next 5 years and I was that person in the White House. I was the person that penned that letter. We'll never know. So even if Rosenstein's gone or still here, there could still be a possibility that it could have been anybody, right? So, but I did forget about that letter. Go figure. In the age of the 24-hour news cycle, I did forget about that. And you bring it up today. I was like, ooh, you're right. That did happen. That could have been anybody. So I don't know.
I think it's interesting though when you hear the depending on who you're listening to on the far right of things. I think Sean Hannity, for example, Fox News host of his own show, television, and has a radio show as well. Obviously, a very strong conservative talk show host. Came out right after this latest Rosenstein issue of did he want to wear a wire? Did he say this in jest? And by the way, if you're the Deputy Assistant Attorney General, you got to be careful about what you talk about in jest, because not much is taken as a joke, right? So, but anyway, even Sean Hannity came out and said, "Mr. President, please don't fire him. This is an optics you don't want."
Exactly.
Firing the guy responsible for Mueller.
We're all over names today.
Names are just not our thing today.
Well, real quick, because I'm curious. Yeah. I heard people say that was confusing to them. Why would Sean Hannity advise you don't fire him, right?
Yeah.
Anybody know? Do you guys have
listen, I've got my assumptions here, and I actually agree with Sean Hannity on this.
Okay.
If you're in the midst of an investigation in which you did nothing wrong, or at least you think you did nothing wrong, and those that are trying to figure you out and do their investigation on you, probably not a good idea to fire them. It makes it look like you did something wrong.
Right.
And so as we're going into these midterms, I think that from Sean Hannity's point of view, and if I was advising the president, I would tell him the same exact thing. Listen, from an optics perspective, and let's be real, Americans vote on optics now.
Perception reality.
That's exactly right. And if you don't believe that, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court hearings here in just a little bit. But because we are such a uninformed, spoiled optics society, there I said it, we don't care about facts. We care about how things look. And because of that, we immediately jump to conclusions on things. If Trump were to fire Rosenstein, for reason or not, you've got half of the country and more than half of the media outlets out there that will claim nothing but he's doing this because Mueller was getting close.
Obstruction.
That's right.
Well, this was a problem with James Comey, right? I mean, he got rid of him, and then he went on NBC the next day with an interview with Lester Holt and said he did it because Russia. Just bad look. Not a great look, family, right?
That's exactly right. And so, if we've learned nothing from the Comey hearings and the Comey firing and stuff, is that the optics weren't good. The poll numbers didn't favor Trump after that.
Well, the history being with Nixon, when the Watergate scandal was going on, Zach, he fired the AG and then the deputy, and I believe the third gentleman, until he finally got to the fourth guy who was willing to do what he wanted to do.
The Saturday Night Massacre.
That was it.
Yeah.
And you do not want to be being compared to President Nixon right now. So
Right.
Yeah. Usually not somebody that works out well for your going into your second election. And so, so this Rosenstein thing, I think, so the president has come out saying he will meet with him, that he's not going to fire him. My only fear with Donald Trump is I have believed for some time, and there's been nothing that has dissuaded me from this belief, that while I think he is very much a person of his own opinion, that is easily swayed by the last person that gets to talk to him.
Yeah.
So going into that meeting, maybe he'll take a call from Sean Hannity beforehand. I don't know.
Or what mood is he in? Yeah.
That's right. Or what was Fox and Friends talking about that morning of, right? Because we all know that he's a big fan of that show.
He is.
So, as I am. Yeah, it's a good show. Right? I like watching. So it's funny. I'll flip back and forth between Morning Joe on MSNBC and Fox and Friends on Fox. And I got to tell you, if you think the world is in multiple different places at the same time, that's a fun way to do it.
It's a weird place to be in. Yeah, you feel like there's some not an outsider per se, but yeah, it's weird bouncing back and forth between those two channels. You feel like you're in a real weird spot.
It is, and I'll tell you what's interesting with those two channels. And I've been doing this now for about 4 or 5 years, watching both channels and flipping back and forth throughout the morning. It's almost like during the Obama administration, MSNBC was the channel of good hope. Matter of fact, if you'll remember, I'm the geek in the room, so I'm probably the only one that would remember this. Their slogan was "Moving Forward." Mm-hmm. Right? That was their slogan during the Obama years. And they were the happy-go-lucky, and you flip over to Fox News, and it was doom and gloom, right? The world is falling apart, and you can thank Obama for that. Today, those roles are reversed.
Yep.
You turn on Fox and Friends in the morning, and it's, hey, man, the economy's up, everybody's great, flowers are blooming, and peace and prosperity is here again. And MSNBC, you think that we are on the edge of the cliff, the button is nearing being pushed, and we're all going to die soon. You get literally depressed watching it. And so it's been interesting watching the dynamic of how the media outlets have shifted in the last couple of years based on who's in office. So anyway, all right. So Rosenstein, we touched on that one. The next one, this one was interesting. I found that for those of you following the news this last week, it was announced that the Justice Department is investigating the president and CEO, chairman of the board,
Elon Musk.
Mr. Musk.
Mr. Musk.
The pot smoker himself, right? We were joking about this beforehand. If you're a billionaire, I guess you can smoke pot on your podcast. I'm not a billionaire. I will not be smoking pot on my podcast.
No.
We actually joked the other day about maybe having a beer on the podcast. Maybe one of these days we'll try to do that.
One of those THC ones.
The beer summit. You in that, high country, or what is it?
Rocky Mountain High.
Rocky Mountain High.
Yeah.
Loves him that Rocky Mountain High.
We're carving out a spot for you on the show here, Andrew. It may not be a spot you want to be in.
He is vying for the spokesman person on that. Listen, we really need to ping those guys for some advertising funds here, because we talk about their product on every episode of Somewhere in the Middle.
Sponsorship.
And this cold Ozarka that I'm drinking right now.
Yeah. Cold as the Rockies. Wait.
Anyway, meanwhile, back on the ranch here. So Elon Musk has been forced to step down as the chairman of the board.
Yep, for 3 years.
For 3 years, because he tweets and the stock price rises and falls of Tesla.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Not a point or two. They're talking 30.
That's right. So interestingly enough, this is something that should be talked about, because in today's age of social media and how news and information flows very, very quickly, and because we do everything on emotion these days, it makes sense that chairmen of boards of publicly traded companies probably should not have a Twitter account. Or if they do, they probably should not be tweeting about their business.
There should be a media team in between those people.
Right. And you had mentioned something to me, Andrew, I did not know about President Trump's Twitter account. That he's not allowed to block anybody?
Correct. It was ruled earlier this year, I believe, that he's acting as the president, and this is a medium in which he functions as president. So he can't be president and still block people. If he wants to be just the Donald Trump account, he's allowed to block people. But because it's a presidential account and he has made presidential edicts from it, he can't block U.S. citizens.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I thought this was interesting, though, because, again, in today's age of Twitter now, I mean, is this where we're getting our financial news now, too, on how we buy and sell stocks? But it makes sense.
A lot of news on Twitter.
It moves fast.
It does. And so this was the new thing. Here's a guy that started this company, made billions off of it, and now can no longer run it. From a standpoint of being chairman of the board, he can still run it, but there has to be some more oversight on it.
I thought he's still CEO. Is that wrong? Yeah.
So he can still be the CEO. He just cannot be the chairman of the board.
Right.
And time will tell on what ultimately happens with the Justice Department. I don't think they've announced whether or not they're going to ultimately go after him here.
I thought they weren't because of the $40 million fine attached to that.
Is that what it was?
That was my understanding.
$40 million
so
for a tweet.
Explain.
Boy, I hope you really liked what you said.
Sorry. Explain. You're going to have to explain like I'm 5 here. Because I'm one of these people, if I have my own company, all right, I should be able to get on Twitter and say whatever I want.
You can't.
Because it's my thing. I thought that's what freedom is, right? So where am I wrong here?
Go ahead. No.
You are correct unless I have bought into your company. Because now you have a responsibility to me as well as a shareholder. That's where he's getting in trouble.
So Andrew was about to use a word there that if you were 5, you wouldn't get, and I appreciated where he was going. It's called fiduciary liability and responsibility.
Yes.
Right?
Psychic.
So if you... That's where you're going.
I was.
Yeah, so for all you kids out here, here's your financial lesson 101 on the day. If you are on the board of a publicly traded company, therefore the public en masse is allowed to buy part of your company and become an owner via shareholder,
yes,
you by law have a shareholder responsibility to them as their named fiduciary. So that's your responsibility. When they give you their money, you've got to act in their best interest. This is the big, I'm shifting gears a little bit, but this is the big argument right now in the healthcare world. So since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, healthcare stocks have more than doubled. Matter of fact, I think the average was somewhere around 225% increase since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Boy, we really reined in those big insurance companies, didn't we, boy?
Wow.
And the argument there is, from a fiduciary responsibility perspective, in other words, from a responsibility to their shareholders who are giving them money and saying, hey, do good with my money, they're returning a great return on that investment.
However, me as your member...
That's right. You're denying my claim now, or you're not paying things the way you were, or you're raising my premiums.
Or you're sneaking me bills. Yeah.
That's right. Now all of a sudden I'm really questioning you. So that's, Zach, the whole issue behind this Twitter thing. And you think about it, I mean, if... let's say that the CEO of ExxonMobil came out tomorrow and said, you know what, solar is the wave of the future, and or wind energy, and you know what, that's a big thing, and all of a sudden the stock price starts moving. I mean, again, remember, he's able to influence, whoever the chairman of any board is able to do is influence the winds of those that are buying their product.
Zach, I got a nerd one for you.
Okay.
Iron Man saying he won't make weapons anymore. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That's a problem because for everybody who owns stock in Mr. Stark Enterprises, right, suddenly they're left out in the cold.
For those of you that are just joining the show, yeah, I'm lost too. I'm not a... Is that a DC comic or is that a...
Marvel.
Marvel, see.
It's a Marvel comic.
Get thrown out here.
Right.
I was an Archie and, Archie comic guy, so...
Hey, I read a lot of Archie comics back in the day.
I knew Zach would get that.
Yeah, good stuff. Reggie Mantle.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you ever become the chairman of the board of a publicly traded organization, careful about what you tweet. Well, and therein lies the difference. Mm-hmm. If it was a publicly traded or a privately held company, which, by the way, Elon Musk has talked about trying to take it
private,
pull it back in, and buy out all the stock and take it private again.
The Saudi investors, yeah.
That's right. So if he was privately held, he can tweet whatever he wants, and the Justice Department's going to leave him alone. He can't do anything about it. But when you say, I am willing to allow the public to buy my company in shares on the open market, you have to be careful about what you say because you could influence the stock price.
I guess, okay, this is, again, one of those things. I'm like, well, you have the freedom to spend your money how you want. If you're looking at Elon Musk and you're thinking, he's a wise investment, that makes sense to me.
Sure.
I should put my money there. And then he does something you don't expect. Isn't that kind of like, well, you gambled and you lost. You bet on a bad horse. Like, why is the Justice Department suddenly responsible for Saving face, I guess.
It's not
for
that
Mr.
he did
Musk.
something and failed. It's that he said something and the stock price shifted.
Right.
And so it's all optics.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that I'm just going to use a hypothetical here. Let's say I'm Elon Musk and I do want to privatize Tesla again.
Sure.
And I've got to buy back with my Saudi investors all this stock. Do I want the stock to drop?
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Oh,
so
right.
you would say something to tank the stock.
On the flip side, let's say I'm ready to get out and I am the CEO of an organization and I hold 40% of its stock.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want that to rise really fast so I can sell out at the right time and be done, right? Hello, Enron.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
So there's your reasoning.
Now it all makes sense.
All right, kids. Fun stuff.
This is your financial lesson.
Meanwhile, also in California, a law was passed last week bringing a new wave of affirmative action in a new #MeToo way. So a law was passed in the state of California. I believe it says something to the effect of...
A woman, every corporation that has a board of directors must have at least one female director on the board.
Tread lightly, grasshoppers. But listen, so we were talking to Anna before the show here at Real News, Anna, who's done a lot of work for our show here, and she made a great comment. I actually agree with her. It's sad that it's come to this. It's sad that we have gotten to the place where we have to legislate a board adding a female rather than there being qualified females, and let's go get them on our board.
But that number has been increasing year over year after year. And again, I'm quoting a number that I read on a website. It's something like 20% of boards are female across the board.
Like entirety. Of boards.
So I'm saying we're getting there. We're not as fast as apparently California wants. But
sure. Is this California just trying to ride the wave of the Me Too movement?
It kind of sounds like it, because if you come out against this, so if I want to take the devil's advocate position, which is, hey, how about we hire who's ever the most qualified?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, let's say, when I worked in when I was doing theater stuff, and we needed to have diesel generator operators. We were required to have one female diesel operator.
This is a union thing?
This is a union thing.
Okay.
This was IATSE.
Wait, is this a real thing?
This is a real thing.
Okay.
This is a real thing.
I didn't know this was an example.
What we ended up doing was just hiring a female and having her stand there, because there's not a lot of female diesel generator operators hanging out in the Bay Area. We couldn't find them. So we would end up having to just, okay, we need you. You come work the shift for 6 hours and just stand there. And then we'll do the work anyway. That's stupid. You should have hired whoever was the most skilled at the job. In the same way that I'm sure there's plenty of roles where you're probably not going to find, like nursing. You're not going to find a lot of male nurses in some parts of this country. And if nursing programs suddenly had to have a certain number of men quoted in, you'd have to probably drop the standards depending on where you were in the country to get more people in. And it's not good business, and it's just a bad idea.
Well, listen, I think this is the challenge, and I'll take the other side of that coin, which is an argument of why is there only 20%? If women are just as capable as men of serving on boards, and just as many women are graduating from business school as men, and then how come that number isn't closer to the 50% range? Is it because corporations and business is still a good old boys club, and we're working our way there, but we're not there yet? Probably that's part of it. I will tell. I'm going to go out on here, and this is. I'm being very careful with this statement because I might offend the wrong people. But hey, it's Monday. I think that this Me Too movement is going to have a negative impact on corporations wanting to hire women.
Because now you're afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right. But when this thing came out, when this first thing came out, I made it very clear that this is going to have the anti-feminist effect that they're looking for two reasons. One is we're going to hear this swath of people that have done bad things, and and all of a sudden now this isn't, it's going to scare the heck out of people. But there's going to be one or two false accusations out there, and as soon as we start getting false accusations, this is every corporate male's concern is the potential of being falsely accused. I'm speaking as someone who sits on the board of a company, a couple of different companies, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and voluntarily sits on the board of another corporation. That's a fear that we all have as men. And by the way, this is a real fear that females should have too. Anybody should have the fear of being wrongfully accused of something you didn't do and having that impact your organization, right? And so I think that the unfortunate reverse effect or potential reverse effect of the Me Too movement is that more and more corporations just might be, now they won't come out publicly and say this, but they just might be saying, yeah, you know what, let's maybe slow down on the hiring of females. It's a sad place that we're in, but that's the sad reality of the fallout of what was intended to be a good thing, and I think that has been a good thing, is that we're shining light on some sleazebags that are out there for years that needed to be outed, and I'm glad that they are, but the adverse effect of that is that with every potential false accusation, you get somebody who's saying, you know what, maybe I'll lean the other way on this.
Yeah, it's a challenging position, I think, for a woman to be in as well, because if you are running to be on, maybe you want a position on a board, right? If you're the only female on a board in California, aren't you going to have to wonder, like, did I actually earn this one, or am I meeting a quota? Am I here to check a box on a company list? And ideally, you want it to be the former. The scary part is California has now opened that to be the latter, right? Mm-hmm. That now that is something you have to think about.
That's right. And, with California, too, because we know California is so business-friendly.
Yeah.
By the way, as a tax-paying Texas citizen, thank you, California, for continuing to pass laws that make corporations want to leave you and come to the great state of Texas.
Andrew, how do you feel about that, sitting over there?
I left California for a reason.
Yeah.
I love it. The weather was great. The view's fantastic. The people charming. But we couldn't afford it. So...
Yeah, I got a buddy, Nathan. Nathan is in the San Francisco Bay Area. He listens to the show quite often, and I haven't had this conversation. Maybe I'll reach out to him because he used to live here in Texas, now in California. He may be having the reverse effect, feeling the reverse effect of that. But I love California. I think every time that I'm out there, I'm going, man, I can see why it's so expensive to live here. But it's also, from a corporate perspective, I would never consider moving my company to California. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so laws like this, unfortunately, continue to impact that. Shifting gears one other time on news stories that happened last week. We talk about protesting a lot on this show, the pros and the cons, the good and the bads, and boy, did we have another bad.
Oh, no. I don't know if I've heard this story.
Listen,
what happened?
If you have a position on something and you want to take the microphone, by all means do it. But grow up. If a man is having dinner with his wife in a restaurant, that is not the time to approach them and to rally your troops and harass. Because I will tell you, as an independent thinker, all you're doing for me is making me want to side with your opposition. So last week, Senator Ted Cruz is having dinner with his wife, Heidi, in some restaurant in D.C., and some clowns decided this is the time to approach him about this Kavanaugh situation. And I think they were chanting, "You're a friend of a rapist," or something. I mean, something so, by the way, again, right or wrong on Kavanaugh, and we'll talk about that here in a second, he has not been accused of rape, right? Attempted maybe, or sexual assault. But again, here's the thing. First of all, if you're going to be a clown just because you have an iPhone and you're able to tweet this out and feel good about yourself, get your facts straight before you do it. Second, have some class, man. Who are you trying to convince? Because you're not convincing me that you have anything worthwhile to say. You're convincing me that you're a joke.
Yep.
And you're just annoying. That's all.
Yeah, this was surprising for a couple of reasons. One, because it happened, right? And you'd think we'd be in a place where this doesn't happen, but then again, we have the age of the internet and Twitter, so why not? Two, Beto O'Rourke came out and agreed. He was like, this is wrong. Do not harass Senator Cruz. He's a good guy. All right, take it easy, for God's sake.
Yep.
That's where politicians should be, regardless of party lines. You should be looking at each other and go, you know what? Yeah, that's not okay. Why isn't the public there?
Well, I think the public is there. I think that any, and by the way, I'll say this: big credit to Beto O'Rourke for coming out. I was really glad when I saw the tweet from him the next day saying, "Hey, listen, you can argue on policy, but this is wrong. There is no justification for this from anybody." But I think, Zach, to your point, I think any normal thinking American that will be honest with themselves will tell you this was wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
The problem is, this show being the exception to that rule, most normal thinking Americans don't have a microphone.
Squeaky wheel gets the oil.
That's right. So because those that typically step up to the microphone are the clowns, those that get their shows on anywhere but the Real News Communication Network.
Hey.
Are those that are what people have asked us to be, which is more polarizing. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be polarizing. I want to find out. I want to have a conversation. That's what this show is about. That's what some other shows are about that I enjoy. But when you care more about the optics of your going against somebody than what you're really saying, you know, I think that is a sad place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I do. I guess I like to think the best of people, which is clearly not a good place to be right now in this current situation that we're talking about. I like to think a lot of it's like mob mentality. See a couple people doing something, hey, I want to get on that. Whatever they're doing, hey, yeah, I kind of agree with that. But like the fact is, yeah, the guy's eating dinner with his wife. Like, just let him eat dinner. You know what I mean? Like, celebrities don't want you to come up and get a selfie with them when they're in the middle of something. Politicians don't want you to come up and tell them how much you disagree with them. Call their office. They have a hotline. Like, it's fine, right? Leave a voicemail. They have interns. Don't. You know, it's
well,
just,
it's another thing. Listen, if you're Ted Cruz and you're having coffee at the local Starbucks there and in D.C. and you want to approach Ted Cruz and give him your opinion on it, first of all, I mean, by all means, feel free to go up there. But to rally a group of people with the intent only of this, I mean, somebody tipped off these folks that he was there, right? I mean, it's got to be.
Sure.
I think, Andrew, you were saying the restaurant owner was trying to get a hold of this situation, get these people out of his restaurant.
That was my understanding, but it's just one guy being like, hey, stop. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't stop a mob.
please.
And so you've got all this going on. There is a level of decorum that we need to have in the United States when you have a grievance or an opinion and when it's right and when it's not right to take that to those who would listen. Here's the problem with this. Every time I hear or see something like this, I think there is one less person willing to dive into this ring.
Let's bring duels back. Let's just do it.
Stop that.
Just on the lawn.
All right, Aaron Burr.
Pistols at noon.
Pistols at noon. My
No,
God.
because here's the thing. If we really want the best of the best to step up and say we want to be public servants, there's nobody I'm going to agree with 100%. You and I likely don't agree on 100% of things. Zach, you and I likely don't agree on 100% of things. I don't agree on 100% of things probably with my own wife or my father or mother. There are some things there that we might differ on. And so in today's world, we want somebody that agrees so much with us that we're willing to oppose the next guy or gal just based on that one or two things that we don't necessarily agree with. And because of our ability to harass them into oblivion, they're just not going to run, right? And we'll shift gears here in a second and talk about the Kavanaugh situation because I think this is something he mentioned to this in his statements too, which is all you're doing is preventing anybody from wanting to step into this ring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's tough. I think people are so quick to forget. Like, I think this is the reason why whenever we have an exterior force in the United States against us, we can all rally, right? 9/11, everybody's waving a flag. Everybody's like, hey, we're in this together. A bad hurricane, right? And suddenly politics fall to the wayside and we're all in this together. We're all neighbors. Let's work this out. When we don't have when we don't have tragedies like that, I should say, we end up in a position where we're forced to look at each other, I guess, and that's where we find ourselves angry and pointing fingers. And when you see a guy having dinner with his wife, just for a second, remember, like, hey, we're all Americans. We're all on the same side, and no matter what, we can hate each other a lot. But like, for God's sake, let's save the anger and the vitriol for when it's for somebody who's not on the same side as us at the end of the day, right? Like, that would be important, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, if you really dislike Ted Cruz himself, join one of the 55,000 people that was out this past weekend at a nice little rally that Beto O'Rourke had with Willie Nelson.
Yeah, those making headlines.
Yeah, so for those of you that aren't in Texas, obviously a very heated senatorial campaign right now is the one between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, the Senate seat, which for decades has been held by a Republican in Texas, which has long since been believed as a very red state. And now all of a sudden, some polls actually are showing Beto ahead. And so in a last stitch, hey, let's show how much our movement is working, Beto holds a concert rally with none other than Willie Nelson. And if you're a Texan, I don't care which side of the political aisle you fall on, you likely have some fondness for Willie Nelson. I know I do. And 55,000 people showed up.
A lot of people.
So, of course, the left-wing media runs with this and says, look at the movement that Beto has. And I wanted to say, all right, New York Times, you're not in Texas. In Texas, you can get 55,000 people come out and see Willie anytime you give a free concert, right? Now, that said, if I am going to hold a liberal rally in Texas, where am I likely going to hold that rally? Austin. So you combine Austin, Texas with Willie Nelson. Listen, you could put the devil himself on stage and 55,000 people would come out to see it, right? Now, again, time out for those of you that are going to write into the show. I am not comparing Beto O'Rourke with Lucifer, okay? I'm just saying that in Texas, if you want people to show up, you give them free Willie Nelson concerts. They will show up. And so it was interesting, though, to see how this spun as Beto O'Rourke continues his national campaign. And when I say national, I mean this is multiple weeks in a row where he's done something at a national level to support it. So meanwhile, him and Ted Cruz have had a debate now where we learned more and more that Beto O'Rourke is a liberal. Yeah. No question about it. He's deciding that what most Democrats have failed doing in Texas is running as quasi-conservative.
He was more centered just a few months back.
He was.
Yeah.
And he's now shifted. And Andrew and I were talking about this. Is this the new era? Is this what we should expect in politics from here on out? Because it used to be you'd run to the left or to the right and then move to the center in a general election. So in the primaries, you'd run to the far end. And then once you got to the general, you'd run to the middle, and that's where you'd probably govern. Mm-hmm. I think we're seeing a shift here. Is this just how divided our country is that now no longer are we moving more towards the middle when it comes to governing, but yet we're moving further and further away?
Because if you vote centrist, in the next election, your own party candidate is going to say, hey, remember when he jumped ship and changed sides and voted with the Republicans or voted with the Democrats? And it gets used against you if you try to balance out your constituents. That's crazy because any senator is going to have both Republican and Democratic constituents. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to vote left and right on certain issues. And always voting one direction is just crazy.
I think it's undeniable, right, that some of these candidates are at least following the footsteps of the Donald Trump playbook. It worked.
Yeah,
it worked like gangbusters. Turns out if you come out hard on your angle, you might get somewhere, and it surprised everybody. And so you look at somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who ran on a primarily socialist platform in New York and won. It surprisingly works. And when we talked about the Democrats and the big tent versus Republicans and the small tent a few episodes back, I think Democrats need a direction. You have to represent a lot of people, and you need a way to do it. And I think a positive, at least a way for them to do it, is to come out hardline and go, listen, here's where we land. Here's our stances. I also think it's worth noting that Mr. O'Rourke seems to consistently pass along the message that we are not stuck on party politics. We are all Americans, and we're doing this for the future. He's not doing this for anything immediate. It seems to be we're doing this for generations to come. We're doing this for everybody. We're all together, which is an interesting stance and does not feel exactly like Donald Trump's stance, but it's arguably just as extreme in his approach, I guess, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I think, listen, he knows what he's trying to do, and he's doing it. And obviously the polls are showing that he's doing it really well. I'll tell you, as someone who has historically been a conservative, there were some parts of his message that resonated with me early on. It seemed like a genuine guy. And I think that's what America is looking for right now. most kind of mainstream Americans that maybe find themselves somewhere in the middle on things are looking for the guy that they or girl that they feel wants to do their best, not their party's best. Wants to be genuine about how they believe in things and be articulate in how they communicate it. And I think most Americans, if you ask them, don't want somebody who's just going to go toe the party line when they get to D.C. They're going to listen to things. They're going to debate. They're going to have an open mind. And I think Beto O'Rourke for a while was tapping into that. Now, I think what is happening in the last couple of weeks is he may have overplayed that hand, and now he's starting to shift a little bit the other direction of being a bit more liberal, and I don't know that in the end that helps him in Texas. I think that he had enough people kind of buying into this idea that I'm a genuine, honest guy, and I won't always side with the Nancy Pelosi's of the world. But now, more he talks, more people, or at least that I'm talking to, who may have been open-minded on Beto, are saying, I'm a little concerned now. I'm concerned that I'm just sending it the next puppet to D.C. to do whatever it is that Pelosi and Schumer want them to do. And while I might really want to vote for a Beto O'Rourke, I may not. This is what I'm hearing from people that I talk to. And, I think that what we saw last week out of D.C. didn't help Beto O'Rourke's cause, which is shifting into our last topic here, which is we had our hearings last week. We had our hearings with Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh. Did you guys get to watch that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I took some time. We were running it upstairs, so I popped up and watched bits and pieces of it and then watched recaps online. You know how it goes.
Yeah, and it was interesting, I think. So I got to watch both of them. Interestingly enough, I was getting on a plane about the time that Dr. Ford was being sworn in and started her statement, and so I'm spotty Wi-Fi. That's a show in and of itself. How much garbage the Wi-Fi is on airplanes. American Airlines, if you're listening in, come on, you got to do better. You're gonna charge me $30 for internet.
They're calling you out, American.
Make it work. It's worse than dial-up. Anyway, so I'm trying to stream as much as I can, or stream the audio at least to hear this. But I wanted to see the visual too, because this is again, we're talking about optics. And you know what? She came across very genuine. Something has happened to this woman. I didn't listen to her going, boy, she's lying through her teeth. And I thought that after she was done, I went, ooh, Kavanaugh's done. Just from an optics perspective, whether he did this or not, she didn't stumble. She came across as very genuine and somebody who had been harmed, and she was pointing the finger at somebody that unless he comes out swinging and does a 180 on this, he's done. And he came out swinging.
Yeah, he did. He was fierce. But as you're mentioning, we have two very trustworthy people. Where do we go from here as outsiders?
Right, two people who fairly clearly, at least to me, both seem to believe what they're saying. Both of them,
that's right.
From what I can tell, both of them believe it.
That's exactly right. I mean, again, I'm listening to this, and listen, I'll tell you, going into this thing, while I had no reason not to believe her, the way in which this whole thing was brought about by the Democrats had me skeptical. Because they've got this thing since July. If they really want to investigate this deal, they'll find a way to do that.
So why were they doing it at the 11th hour?
11th hour, public hearings, right? Listen, agree with him or not, go back and listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say. Because, man, you want to talk about an impassioned response. That dude was fired up. But so I went into this almost skeptical of this whole thing, just because of the way that they handled it. I think the Democrats did themselves a massive disservice to anybody who's open-minded. Again, there's one side part of this country that was not open-minded from the get-go. They weren't going to be open-minded. They were looking for a reason to hang this guy out to dry, and they found it in this. And then there's another half of the country that, listen, he could have done it, and it wouldn't have mattered to them. Because he was put up by the Trump administration. He's a conservative. He worked in the Bush White House, and it was in high school, right? I think everybody was looking not to listen to this guy and find something, So there's the few of us that really wanted to hear this thing and say, all right, let me make my own judgment on this. She got done, and I went, I don't not believe her. You know? And when he comes out, he's going to have to give me something. And boy, did he. So he comes out. And he did what I think any red-blooded American man would do that has been accused wrongfully of something as heinous as sexual assault. He's swinging. And he doesn't care. He'll take you down with him. But there are a few things in my own life that I will get as heated about. And that is, one, you come after my family, or you come after my integrity, my character. I was called one time a liar out in the business world. Obviously, people have ways of doing and saying things, and in an effort to change the business narrative, I was called out as a liar one time. And I gotta tell you, unhinged Seth came out. Because you can say I suck at what I do from a business perspective, that I am no good and that somebody else is better. Okay, that's your perspective, and you're entitled to that opinion. But if you call me out as being a liar, now we are in a different ballgame here. And
that's just your business reputation, let
that's
alone
just my
your
business
personal
That's right.
reputation.
You know, and as a dad of daughters, my daughter's opinion of me means everything. And I thought that and I'm going to get to the Republicans here in a minute, because I think they made some massive missteps on this too, and I'm ashamed of some of the stuff that I saw there too. But listen, anybody do something dumb in high school? By the way, time out. I'm not going to sexual assault. That's in a category in and of itself.
That's not dumb. That's a crime.
Right.
But the Democrats were going after every dumb thing that Kavanaugh might have done in high school. Anybody else? Hey, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. Has anybody else out there not done something stupid in high school that they went, boy, I kind of wish that nobody knew anything about that?
Yeah.
They're pulling out his yearbook? I mean, come on. Again, you want anybody to ever run for public office or allow themselves to be in the spotlight here? Let's narrow our questioning to the situation with Dr. Ford. And I know that some are going to say, well, they were trying to draw a parallel to his character and who he was in high school. You know what I'd love to do is look at everything that every one of those senators did in high school too.
High school kids are stupid. They are.
We say stupid stuff.
They're stupid.
Well,
They're not mature yet.
Hold on. Let me jump in here. Let me.
I'll knock the 17 down crowd.
That's.
I'll say it.
We all know high schoolers are dumb. Like, right? That's the whole reason this got as far as it has, is because everybody looks at the situation and goes, yeah, that could have happened. Sure. That's the problem. Yeah. Like, that's the issue we've got. Yeah, is that this could have happened. And because it's in high school, that's really, I think, where this problem falls. And of course, you got to figure out whether or not it did happen. Of course, you have to figure that out. But at the same time, you also have to decompress and go, wait. What was the context? What was the situation? We don't have that. We can't get that. That was 30 years ago.
Yep.
And a yearbook or calendars or whatever you bring in for evidence, they can't really provide that, I guess.
Yeah, so I think that where the Republicans made a massive misstep here is in two areas too. And I was first of all, if you're gonna ask questions of somebody, be a man and ask a question. Don't worry about the optics of it and have to bring somebody else in to ask your questions for you.
A woman specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I get it. They're so terrified of looking like, listen, I think one of them, maybe it was Orrin Hatch, said, well, she was an attractive female. Like, oh, God, Orrin.
What was she wearing? God.
Or maybe it was Grassley. I don't remember. Anyway, somebody correct me if you're listening to this. But anyway, so I'm sitting there going, but you guys look like a bunch of cowards here. That you're unwilling to ask this woman any questions. You're going to bring somebody else to do your dirty work for you.
But I would also comment that that's, again, CNN, MSNBC, Vox, all of them have made a huge deal about this is just a bunch of old, rich white guys sitting in a room.
Sure.
Well, then, of course, then they don't want us to question her. I guess we have to bring in a woman. So I would almost defend them a little bit on that, but not enough to excuse it.
I might, but here's where I'm going to go with that. Yes, we are a bunch of rich white guys. So's the other side, except there's a couple of females over there, right? Did anybody on that committee not have their mind made up before they went into those hearings anyway, though?
No.
So own it. Own who you are. So Andrew and I were talking about this. I think I got a new idea for Senate committee hearings.
Take it away.
If you are going to go into a committee where somebody's going to testify, and this was another thing. So over the weekend, Bernie Sanders sends a letter to Chuck Grassley, effectively saying, what was it, Andrew? It was something to the effect of you need to open up this thing so that we can all hear what happens, so that we can all formulate an opinion. And I thought Grassley's response was great. Wait a minute. You came out 24 hours after he was nominated already formulating your opinion. Are you telling me you're open to change your mind?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't. He's not open to changes his mind. His mind's made up.
This
is an optics thing. So here's Seth Denson's new idea for the Sergeant of Arms of the U.S. Senate and how we will conduct committee hearings that are televised. Not televised? Don't care. Televised for the American public? Here's the rule. Every committee member on the U.S. Senate is required to take a polygraph.
Oh, can you imagine that live?
Prior to the committee hearing.
Do it during.
Dear Mr. or Mrs. Senator, have you already formulated your full-fledged opinion on this matter, or are you open to listening to all evidence and being open-minded about it?
Yeah. Polygraph explodes.
That's right. Because that was a show, and it was, as I'm not going to say because this is a family show, an show.
Yeah.
It was for cameras. It didn't need to be for cameras. Dr. Ford didn't win. Mr. Kavanaugh didn't win. This was ugliness at its best.
This is for November, and this is for 2020.
It was an embarrassment.
Yeah.
It was an embarrassment. And you know what? Again, to both of them, they both came out looking understandable in their approach to this. I found myself feeling for her in a situation that I cannot understand because it's never happened to me. And I found myself feeling for him in a situation where I can understand because I have been falsely accused of things in my life. Never to the extent of what he's been falsely accused of, but being accused of something does bring out this part of you that wants to defend that to your core. And then all of a sudden now they were saying, well, he's unhinged. He doesn't have the temperament to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah, he does.
Shifting the goalposts.
Because I want somebody on the court who's going to defend the Constitution with the charisma that he did himself and his family and his honor, as his mother and father who gave him his name were sitting right behind him. I would do exactly the same. Now, I don't have the temperament to be on the U.S. Supreme Court, obviously, but I was really frustrated by that.
Andrew, you mentioned shifting the goalpost. I wanted to ask about that.
Well, now it's the big soundbite now is that he's unhinged. Unhinged is the word that's being thrown around. Is that he's not fit. Even if he didn't do it, he's not fit. Look at his behavior. Look at his past behavior. How is this going to be for someone who's going to sit on the bench for the next 30 or 40 years? And you've shifted the goalposts. So now it's not only does he have to defend himself against being an accused sexual predator, now he's being judged for the manner in which he does. Like, he has to be calm and rational and cold. If I'm watching you on TV and you're like, no, I didn't kill those people, and you're being accused of some horrible crime and you're really calm about it, I think that would scare me, wouldn't you? I mean, it's no, I didn't harm those children, and you're like totally level-headed. I would be like, okay, something's weird here. I want you to be like, how dare you?
Right. Well, I mean, we talk about shifting goalposts.
Take it.
Devil's advocate. I want to just throw that out there, disclaimer in front of what I'm about to say. Who is ultimately the victim here, right? In what is this suggested crime? The victim is Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Shifting the goalposts to me from far away is whoa, hold on, they're both victims. He's now a victim too. He's a victim of this. Like we've already shifted goalposts. The reason we do this show is shifting goalposts. My God, and trying to find out where the goalposts should be. Yep. That's the somewhere in the middle. I guess I don't really have a point to that.
No, I see what you're saying.
It's about where I ran.
But the shifting of the goalposts, he is a victim if she's lying.
That's right.
She is a victim if he is.
Right.
Like, it really comes down to which one's telling the truth, and we don't know.
Right. And that's what's so gutting about watching that, right? Is because everybody watching it understands that the people sitting there have probably already made up their minds.
And Seth mentioned last week, someone's life is getting destroyed. Both of their lives are getting destroyed, regardless how this turns out.
Yeah, I agree.
Her reputation is forever marred. His reputation is forever marred by a large percent, by millions of people, regardless of what the verdict is found.
Well, and to your point, Zach, I mean, I think they are both victims here, regardless of the outcome. And I say that because let's say he didn't do it.
She's misremembered. Sorry.
He's now been jump in because he's now been falsely accused, so he's the victim, right? That's where we're all going to turn to this. But guess what? I think and I've heard everybody say this. She's been victimized, whether it was him or not.
And
there's some truth to this.
Oh, absolutely.
And so she's still a victim. Maybe not his victim, but she's a victim.
Yeah.
But I will tell you who she's a victim of. The left.
Democrats.
And she's and again, I've been critical of the right. So don't write in here to me and give me your BS about me not being critical here.
Here come the Facebook comments.
But here's the thing. Somebody leaked her letter, which she didn't want leaked.
A senator's office.
Right. Yeah. Or a congressman, the congressman she originally turned it into. There's somebody in there, all right? And it came out that, that Grassley offered to move the Senate hearing behind closed doors to California to protect her a little bit. Say, hey, you don't want to fly, we get it. She wasn't there. She was in Delaware hiding out with the attorney that was recommended to her by the left. And again, I'm okay. You want to, you know what? Maybe it was right for her to get attorney recommended. And of course, Dianne Feinstein has her favorites. So she's going to send them their way. But it came out that she didn't even know that offer was made to have this. If that's the case, is there any question this didn't want to be played? That there weren't those parties that wanted this to play out in public regardless? She was the pawn.
Yeah.
She was the pawn. So regardless, she's the victim too. It's a shame. It's a shame. Final thoughts on that, guys?
No, I think you're right. It's like we talked about last week. Not to reiterate, but yes, we have two essentially cosmic bodies that have slammed into each other, and it's just going to turn into a huge mess. And both are in trouble. I think both have reported receiving death threats from the public. So it worked out great, I guess. Yeah, like mutually assured destruction. I don't know how that comes out, but yeah.
Yeah, listen. It's a sad state that we're in. It really is. I feel for both of them. I'm no closer to the truth on this thing than anybody else is. And I actually, again, I'm gonna make the right mad on this. I thought it was a good idea to go ahead and let the FBI do what they're doing now. I think that was a misstep from the beginning too. Soon as this thing came out, the right should have said, you know what, get the FBI involved. Let's go. I know that I'm going to have somebody write in. I'm looking at comments here, and I think that some of them, Vince, you're making some good comments here on YouTube. I agree with you. Here's the challenge, though. The right took a misstep here because this was out. Squash it. How do you squash it? Let an independent party look at it and say, there's no proof here.
Shine a light on it.
That's right. Don't run away from it. Don't shy away from it. Now, I know the argument is, well, he'd already been vetted 6 times before. Had he been vetted specifically for this? No, he hadn't. No, he hadn't. And I agree with what a lot of the folks said on the committee on the right, which said, hey, listen, the pattern here is that people that do this don't stop doing it. And can we all agree that he's had some power throughout his career? And typically people in power tend to do it doesn't make people better. They do, if they're already doing bad things and they get power, they typically don't stop doing bad things just because they got power. They actually do it more. Mm-hmm. And so we haven't heard that. So statistics are in favor of the fact that this probably didn't happen, at least not in the way that it has been portrayed. But nobody knows. So why not have the FBI investigate it, be done with it? I'm okay with the timeline, right? I started this week with an over-under saying how many new allegations are going to come out of nowhere this week. I'm shocked that we haven't seen any so far, but we've been in the studio here. We've been in the studio for an hour, so I don't know.
I don't know if that's an endearing thing I should laugh at. It's only Monday. Ha ha. Like, maybe I shouldn't think that's as funny as I do.
But everybody that wants their 15 seconds can take them up on this. And, you know. Anyway, I'll tell you that after the hearings, I got home. I was traveling, and I got home, and Jenna and I were talking about it a little bit, and we were both just like, we felt dirty. I was embarrassed of my country on Thursday and Friday. And I really wanted to watch the Andy Griffith Show all weekend. Because, you know, I wanted to watch Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I wanted to watch something that would give me a little bit more pride in the people that are in D.C. because I sure didn't have any pride there. I wanted to reach out to all of my Canadian friends and say sorry about that.
Have you guys watched Veep on HBO? You watched that at all?
No, I've heard of it. But
I've
not watched it.
I've heard lately, at least, you know, from people who claim they work in D.C., former White House staffers, they've always said that, like, people who work in D.C. think their lives are like House of Cards, but it's more like Veep. Like, it's more just like this goofy comedy where we're all stumbling backwards through what we think is due process and good ideas.
Yeah.
And in a way, in a small, insignificant way, I find comfort in that.
Sure. I'd always hoped it was a little more West Wing, but...
Yeah, well, that's what you hope for, right? I don't know.
You do. But unfortunately, the people there showed their hands. And you know what? The more we have hearings like we had on Thursday and Friday, the more those people are safe and secure in their positions, because it's not like you're going to get a good guy or girl to step up and challenge them. Because I tell you right now, I'm not.
Nope.
I'm not. All right. Well, hey, listen, it was a fun show. I think we're all caught up on the news of the day. I don't know that we moved the goalposts anywhere today, Zach, but it's
important to figure out where
we're
they
at least
are,
having
right?
the conversation. Hopefully, if you're listening to this one, you'll join us every Monday. We tend to go live about 1:20, 1:30. Join in the conversation. Feel free to chat with us. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and then, of course, you can download the podcast anytime. Please feel free to rank us and review us. That's the only way we'll move up in the rankings, and more people can listen to what we have to say here and you know, comment for or against what we're talking about. So, Andrew, thanks, buddy.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Enjoyed it. Zach, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
To all the folks here at Real News Communication, thank you very much. And, of course, as always, to my beautiful wife, Jenna. 13 years of marriage and strong. Love you dearly. And my beautiful daughters, Emerson and Arabella. Daddy loves you. Thank you. And while I may be considering a number of things, I do know where I land on this. I don't remember a time when I was more embarrassed for our country, at least of its leadership. Don't get me wrong. Thanks to Twitter, there have been a number of moments from our leaders as of late. But this past week, during the Kavanaugh hearings, I found myself taking a different look at where we have come as a society and just how far we have to go. Oftentimes in America, we forget that by world history standards, we're still relatively a young, developing country. But last week, there was no doubt that we are but a teenager, and a petulant, mean, and obnoxious teenager, as we played out in broad daylight what could have easily been and should have been handled behind closed doors. And in our apparent search for the truth, the only truth found was that we really have a long way to go and a lot of growing up to do. And this was on both sides of the aisle. Republicans made a massive misstep when they were so cowardly they wouldn't even ask questions themselves. Rather, they had someone else do their dirty work for them. Really? Come on. Own who you are and man up. And Democrats, well, they were just as bad, as they were not interested in the truth and instead interested in publicly crucifying someone. Yes, I said crucify. This was a modern-day execution. And I believe Kavanaugh wasn't the only potential target, as this would have likely played out regardless of who the candidate or nominee was. They would have looked to do this to anybody. In the end, all the facts are still questionable. We don't really know what happened, and we don't know where the facts are going to come out, or if they ever will. I watched both testimonies. Was Dr. Ford a credible witness? Absolutely. Was there any reason to doubt what she was saying? Not at all. And after listening to Judge Brett Kavanaugh, he was believable too. But the Democrats are now also saying that he was unhinged. Of course he was unhinged. He's a person, And a man at that. If you're a man and you're accused of something as truly heinous as sexual assault, I'm wondering why you wouldn't be unhinged in your defense. That isn't an accusation you take on the chin. You defend yourself. You defend your family. You defend your honor. That's what being an American is all about. This is the time when your principles matter. If it happened, she's sticking to her principles by coming forward with this. And if it didn't, then he most certainly is sticking by his defense himself as fiercely as he possibly can. And when it comes to being an American, the only two people I saw that were Americans in that room last week were Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh. Finding myself somewhere in the middle, I'm Seth Denson.